All right, the advocate I'm refuting states that by labeling obesity as a disease, it will possibly change the perspective people have on the condition. The thought is that 1, calling obesity a disease will make the public and medical community look at the condition in a more serious light. 2, calling obesity a disease will reduce the negative stigma most people have on it. And 3, the medical community considers obesity to be a disease. In refuting the first point, that calling obesity a disease will make the public and medical community look at the condition in a more serious light, calling obesity a disease will have little to no impact on the public and medical community's perspective of the condition's severity. There is no evidence to prove that by labeling obesity a disease will make the public and medical community look at the condition in a more serious light. No reason to believe that the physicians will pay more attention to the condition if it were categorized differently, and nothing stated to support the inference that insurers will be spurred to pay for treatment. The only source given for this point is taken from the advocate of obese people, Morgan Downey, who states that companies marketing products will be able to take this to physicians and point to and say, look, the mothership has now recognized that obesity is a disease. This quote is irrelevant and proves nothing other than the fact that obesity was recognized as a disease. This woman would spread the word. Yet from this quote, it's somehow assumed that physicians would counsel their patients about obesity more than they already do, and that healthcare providers will be reimbursed for the time spent on proper nutrition, exercise, and health lifestyle habits. Time magazine suggests that there is little precedent that disease labeling will help change the way the medical community tackles this complex issue. And in refuting the second point, that calling obesity a disease will reduce the negative stigma most people have on it. Calling obesity a disease will not reduce the stigma that most people have on it. The negative stigma that my opponent mainly refers to is the common assumption that most people think obesity stems from overeating and exercising too little, and this assumption is common, not because it's a negative stigma, but because it can be true. Though doctors have stated that people do not have full control over their weight, research suggests that people with the FTO gene are more likely to eat more fatty foods and eat more impulsively as they age, and that even though weight loss, there are hormonal and metabolic abnormalities not reversible by lifestyle intervention, this does not differ from the fact that there are multiple causes of obesity. MedicalNet.com states that the most common causes of obesity are overeating and physical inactivity. In refuting the third point, that the medical community considers obesity to be a disease, this subclaim in no way refers to the main claim. The argument is about whether or not labeling obesity a disease will possibly change the perspective people have on the condition. It's not about whether or not obesity is a disease at all. The information given about obesity being called a disease in many public forums, having been recognized by the FDA and IRS and many other companies, that it is a disease does not prove that the people's perspective on the condition has been positively changed. In fact, that information actually proves the opposite. If obesity fits the description of a disease and all the medical groups recognize it to be a disease already, then where's the change in the positive perspective? MedPageToday.com states that without a single, clear, authoritative, and widely accepted definition of disease, it is difficult to determine conclusively whether or not obesity is a medical disease state. And Russell Criddle, a Texas delegate, suggests that he believes that telling people they have a disease will allow them to throw their arms in the air and surrender and do nothing about it. So in conclusion, the reality is that calling obesity a disease will have little to no impact on the public and medical community's perspective of the condition. Calling obesity a disease will not reduce the stigma most people have on it, and the medical community considering obesity to be disease does not relate to the main claim.
All right, Lauren, all the structural stuff is in good shape. When you get to the first point, you present a clear counterclaim to begin with, and you challenge the adequacy of the evidence that the advocate presented. I thought that that was pretty reasonable, that there's really an absence of information cited to suggest that there would be any alternative way of dealing with this. The analysis of the one piece of evidence that the advocate used, I thought was partially explained. I still think it needed to be clarified a little bit more, but the point that you seem to be making is that doctors already take this seriously, that they do give advice to their patients about obesity issues, and the notion that suddenly calling it something different is going to change the way in which doctors treat this issue seems to be kind of pie in the sky stuff. It sounded like you had a quote from Time magazine, but I wasn't quite clear if that was a direct quote or if it is a paraphrase. If it's a direct quote, I think you probably want to deliver it a little bit differently. By the way, if there's an authority that's being cited there, I think you want to cite them and not just the general purpose magazine. The second point on stigmatization, I thought that you had a reasonable answer, and that is, look, the truth of the matter is there are multiple causes of obesity, and overeating and lack of physical activity are two of those, and people are still going to judge you on the basis of, you eat too much and you don't do any exercise, and if people find that aesthetically displeasing, or they make social inferences about people based on that, the idea that somebody says, well, I have a disease, isn't going to change the fact that when they're being evaluated by somebody else or judged by somebody else, that person's likely to continue to see them that way. I thought that the argument that you had that said that this is really the source of the problem and that there are multiple causes confronts this issue pretty directly. On the third point, you kind of explain how there's some ambiguity, about the issue of how a disease is defined and what people are going to do in response to that. I thought that point it's almost an attempt to dismiss the issue. I think it could be a little bit clearer. I like the the definition that you have. And the second piece of information that you cite there is one of the counterclaims that I have heard about these sorts of things, and that is that it gives people an excuse not to do anything. Well, I have a disease. It's not my behavior. I have a disease, and so they don't feel accountable for it. I think that's a good point, and it might be a good general argument to develop a little bit more. All right, thank you.